History. Our history. Doesn't that sound good? Our history. Not somebody else's history in which we play a supporting role, but our own history in which we are centre stage. We've had a lot of really good gay and lesbian histories recently on stage and on screen. I'm thinking obviously about Angels Over America and the new play The Inheritance. Also on screen, Pride and Beats Per Minute and The Normal Heart. But recently, we've had a piece of local gay and lesbian history, but it's a local history that's had national and international reverberations. I'm speaking, of course, about the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras, the history of which was dramatised by the Australian Broadcasting Corporation's TV movie called Riot, with a marvellous script by Greg Waters based on a story by Carrie Anderson. It encapsulated, brilliantly I thought, a very complicated political history which led up in 1978 to the very first gay and lesbian Mardi Gras, which took the form both of a political protest and a celebration. It was met with violence, but since then it has grown into an annual event which is our pride and joy, and it has made such an impact on so many people. We're talking about thousands and thousands of people that have enjoyed its bravado, its brio, its gorgeous outrageousness, all was backed by a political consciousness. Now the film itself, Riot, is full of interesting characters. They're well presented. My favourite line, which I remember from my days, in the early days of gay liberation in London, it's a very potent line. It's spoken by one of the lesbian feminists, Marg, and it is, "If I wanted to pick up shit from a male chauvinist pig, I would have stayed married." And of course you have to admit that there was some, shall we say, division between certain of the groups, but particularly the genders, during the early days of gay liberation, both in Australia but also in America and Britain and other countries too. But the film shows very much that the diversity and the disagreements ended up in a very potent form, the political and the personal, which is of course the backbone of gay liberation. And yes, the film doesn't shy away from the divisions, the gender divisions, the political divisions, and also the division very much from the gay community. It wasn't actually a gay community to begin with, it became a gay community. People that went to the bars, people that went to the drag shows, that people that weren't politically involved, they didn't go on marches, they didn't protest. And finally the idea came that you could bring those different groups together, and the catalyst was the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras. The film shows a variety of characters, and it shows the change from 1972 to 1978, particularly the evolution of a gay community. I thoroughly recommend this film, and I think it's going to be very successful on DVD. Just wanted to say, you know, that we do have a certain degree of equality today. We can go to our gay dentists and talk about our gay lives, and our gay dentists can talk about the gay dentist's life, which is wonderful, isn't it? And I go to cafes and I hear gay couples talking about their lives and the fact they were on Grindr last week and who they met, and they don't have to keep their voices to a low whisper. They don't have to look around to see who's there. They can just be their normal selves. When I speak of equality, I have to qualify that word, of course. I live in a bubble. I live in King's Cross, where there are many, many, many gay and lesbian people. They walk around, they hold hands, they go to cafes and talk about their lives, some of which involve their sexual lives, and maybe there'll be a mention of Grindr or something like that. Whereas in many towns and small conclaves in Australia, they cannot do that. It is not possible. Secret lives are still the order of the day. It's great, isn't it, that we have friends in high places now, but they can become enemies or weak allies. Things can change. Remember, Berlin had scores of gay and lesbian bars, and as somebody said, overnight they disappeared. Our freedoms are fragile. We need to protect them, we need to be cautious, And as with the early gay liberationists, often called humorless lefties, they realised that gay liberation was part of a wider human liberation, and we need to be aware that it's not just about us. Even though it's our history, it connects with a much wider web of human interaction, of loving and being totally ourselves, but within a group. But that group, our group, is a minority, and we have to accept that fact. It is a minority. Minorities tend to be very vulnerable to changes in society, and we have to be vigilant. And a film like Riot, I think, shows that very well. It shows the process, it shows the pitfalls of conciliation, the pitfalls of perhaps assimilation. One of the things that's very well expressed in Riot is the difficulty of gays and lesbians having children of their own in the 1970s, and the film is particularly expressive in the custody battle that two of the women are involved with. I like the way the children were integrated into the story because it does show that there was a whole family background to a number of the people who were expressing their political individuality, you could say. So it linked it in with mainstream life. Riot is a brilliant demonstration of how we can tell one history. This is the history of a celebration and a protest that became a riot, that became a celebration and a protest every single year, and it's still going on. But we're a minority, remember that. We exist only in the moment. And if we think that things are going to last forever and ever, well, just look at history. That's not always the case. Not that we have to be pessimistic all the time, but we just have to be a little watchful, a little careful that our friends in high places don't suddenly desert us because we are no longer fashionable or we're no longer useful politically. Ultimately, we have to look after ourselves, and this is what Riot so marvellously shows. It's about independence, it's about codependence, it's about community, it's about individuality, it's about living and learning. And the biggest lesson that is learned by the people in the film is, hey, don't be hardline about anything. Don't dismiss things because they're not political. Don't dismiss things because they're not of a particular political persuasion. Embrace it all, because every flavour, every texture is part of who we are as a community. When I looked at it, I felt as though I was from outer space. I thought, is this actually a true story of human beings, intelligent human beings, Homo sapiens? Did they really treat fellow human beings in this way? I had to literally pinch myself until I realised, hey, I was part of it, not in Australia, but in England, in London. I went to the early gay liberation meetings in the very early 1970s, and all I can say is they pinpointed it exactly. I felt I was there. When I wasn't feeling like I was an alien from another planet, I was back there in the 1970s. One of the lines I particularly liked came from a lesbian feminist in the show, and it was, you know, if I thought I was going to have to pick up shit from a male chauvinist pig, I would have stayed married. And I remember that so well, because lesbians were fed up with being asked to make the tea and general dog's bodies by the gay men, because gay men, hang on a minute, aren't these wonderful natural feminists. They were socialized as men, and that's probably why so many lesbians just left the gay movement. And that's beautifully done in the film, as indeed the custody case over the child of one of the lesbians. I felt I knew them. I felt I'd met every single one of those people. I loved the one that actually said, come on, we've actually got to get people from the bars on our side. We cannot go on with these tiny little groups of people that turn up to a political meeting. We cannot keep on preaching to the converted. We've actually got to get out there. We've got to get our hands dirty. We've got to meet the people. And that's the strength of our community is that we're all so different. We're linked, of course, by certain sexual and emotional traits, you could say, desires and affections, but ultimately we're individuals, and this film, I thought, nailed it beautifully. I love the scene where the door opens and Andrew McFarlane as Neville Brown walks into his office and he's confronted by about 20 gays and lesbians instead of the 2 he was expecting. Glorious, lovely sense of anarchy and also control, also intelligence, political nous, learning. You felt, as you were watching the show, all the people in it were learning about how best to deal with an impossible situation. A situation, as I said, which I found, even with my background, absolutely shocking. I found the violence horrific, not just the violence from the police to the protesters, but also the violence shown in one scene from a so-called gay man to another gay man. We lived in very dangerous times during the 1970s and 1980s, and of course we still do. Many of us are still subject to all kinds of abuse, psychological, verbal, physical. But then we've got our histories, and I think this film is going to really give people a lot of things to think about. I think it's going to have a very wide appeal. It's a serious subject. It's rather dry, you could say. It's a dry subject, but I think it's done in such an entertaining way. It's very well acted. It's well photographed. The music, they use Meg Christian's Ode to a Gym Teacher and also Tom Robinson's Sing If You're Glad to Be Gay, among others, is very good. I love the recreation of the checkerboard program with Peter Bonsall-Boone and Peter DeWaal, played by 2 actors. That gave me great delight. First time a famous gay television program has actually been reenacted in a contemporary situation. Look, I give it 4 stars. If there were 5 stars, I give it 5 stars. For me, I was engrossed, I was engaged, I was outraged. It was a lesson in how you put across gay politics of a long gone time. This is we're talking 40 years, 45 years ago. It's a long time. We have moved on since then. But the perils are still there, the pitfalls are still there, and we need as much information, as much knowledge, both about ourselves and also about the society in which we lived and are living in now. They're making art, they're not making documentaries, and look, most documentaries take liberties with the truth, they take liberties with the time, they take liberties perhaps with cutting out certain complexities. There may be contentious statements that have been made about people that are either included or excluded. It's all about editing, isn't it? Everything we do as human beings is about editing. There are lots of things we think but we don't necessarily say. Of course we have a responsibility to people who are perhaps private people. Public people, people who elect to go on television, to write books, to be at meetings, to have their names included in any campaigning. I think to some extent it does behove them to accept that perhaps one day their lives and their personalities may be turned into so-called dramatized fiction or docudrama. Of course, it's never happened to me, so I can hardly complain because I've not been in a situation where I've been misquoted or I've been portrayed by someone who is very different to me. I do know examples of our history which are inaccurate because I was actually there, and I'll give you an example. When Cardinal Pell was inaugurated as Archbishop of Sydney, I was part of a protest group. And it's always been portrayed as an anarchist group, and it wasn't. It was a free thinkers group. And all we asked the people as they came in was, think for yourselves. But that's part of history now, as this anarchist group protested outside the cathedral. So again, it gives a different slant. But obviously, if people feel that they have been included in the research for something and have been badly misled about the way it was going to be done, I think they do have a reason to protest. I think that there is a responsibility of journalists, all journalists, to their sources. I certainly started in journalism working for a publication which insisted that every person I interviewed was shown the interview before publication, and they had complete rights of veto. They could veto the entire article, or they could change facts, or they could cut things out altogether. So my tradition is very much that yes, we do have a responsibility to other people. But look, 1972 to 1978, that's a long time. There were many, many people involved in various groups in Sydney to create what we now have as the Mardi Gras. It's impossible to bring all their backgrounds, all their ideas, all their philosophies into accurate focus. I, of course, wasn't here at the time. I don't know how accurate it was. If people have been maligned, I think that's unfortunate. But I haven't heard of any legal cases being brought against the makers. And I think generally it seems to be a fairly accurate depiction, certainly from my point of view of working for a gay and lesbian newspaper and also going to many meetings. I went to all over England and Wales and Scotland, doing articles, talking to people. And as I said, when I look at that film, Riot, I say, yes, I've met that person. I have met someone like that person. And I don't feel it was trivialized. I don't feel anyone was demeaned. Of course there are differences. Of course there were misunderstandings. Of course there were things that could have been done better, but we can all do better. I'd have loved it to have been a mini-series, of course. I'd have liked it to have expanded more. One of my great heroes is Jack Mundy, who was the famous unionist who put the green ban on a piece of bushland that was going to be developed. He also helps in a very engaging way the gay rights protest where someone is sacked and he and his unionists come to the rescue. Loved that. I thought it dealt with so many issues. It would have been great to have had perhaps a bit more time, but no. I think the fact it's a 100-minute movie is to its advantage, because people cannot make the excuse, oh, we haven't got time to watch a whole TV series. You can spend time watching a movie for 100 minutes, can't you? It's a bit pathetic if you haven't got 100 minutes. I see this going to schools, I see it going to colleges, universities, I see it being watched by politicians, not just in Australia. I think it has huge resonance for many other countries. And what I like about it, it's about a success. It's about an unqualified success, the Mardi Gras. I've marched in the Mardi Gras, I've watched the Mardi Gras. It is a thrilling experience to be part of something which is so good, so kind, so embracing, so much fun, so much glitter, so much glamour, but also lots of political opinions, lots of different groups come into it from year to year. We've seen contentious groups marching, I suppose majorly the military and the police, and I loved, as I said, the ending of Riot, which has a very ironic ending involving two policemen and one of the protesters, and I love that. Look, I love this film. I've seen it twice now. I look forward to seeing it a third time. When I started, I thought, oh, I'm not sure about this. It's a bit too static. And then suddenly I realized, no, it's not static at all. It deals with very recent history, theoretically 40 years ago, but it's very recent in terms of what we've actually achieved in New South Wales, because New South Wales took quite a long time to legalise male homosexuality, not as long as Tasmania, but certainly I think it took far too long. I think it's an outrage. I think the whole story is about outrageous human behaviour towards another group of human beings. I'm angry about it. I think it's great that it's maintained my rage, even now in 2018. And I congratulate the director, I congratulate the writer, all the actors, the camera work, the sound. Look, I think you did a bloody good job. Thank you so much.